And since waging war is so costly in blood and treasure, we owe our republic a military that will win any war we choose. To our enemies, F-A-F-O. Or in combat unit with females who can't meet the same combat arms physical standards as men. Or troops who are not fully proficient on their assigned weapons, platform, or task. Or under a leader who was the first, but not the best. Standards must be uniform, gender neutral, and high.
Since combat roles have been opened for qualified women, there have always been one standard for those jobs.
Yeah, so after the whole meeting of generals and admirals in Quantico, Virginia at the Marine Corps base with Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, there has been what some people are saying is a fallout of he had said, if you are not on board, get out.
More leadership changes will be made, of that I'm certain. Not because we want to, but because we must. Once again, this is life and death. But if the words I'm speaking today are making your heart sink, then you should do the honorable thing and resign. We would thank you for your service. But I suspect, I know, the overwhelming majority of you feel the opposite. These words make your hearts full. You love the War Department because you love what you do, the profession of arms. You are hereby liberated to be an apolitical, hard-charging, no-nonsense, constitutional leader that you joined the military to be.
And that is essentially what this general is doing. That is from the Air Force. Now, this came from General Thomas Bussier, where he says, after much reflection and with a full heart, Barb and I have made the difficult decision to request retirement from the United States Air Force for personal and family reasons. I am deeply honored to have been nominated for Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force and profoundly grateful for the trust and confidence placed in me by the President. Serving alongside the exceptional men and women of our Air Force has been the privilege of a lifetime. I'm especially proud of the warrior airmen of the Air Force Global Strike Command and everything we've accomplished together. While I'm stepping away from active duty, my commitment to service remains. I look forward to finding new ways to support our Air Force, our national defense, and the incredible people who make it all possible. Thank you all who have supported me throughout this journey. General Thomas Bussier, AFGC Commander. This person's like, yep, I'm done. I'm getting out of here. And I also have to say that is, I think, the intent of partially having this in person where all the generals and admirals are there. And the Secretary of War is saying, if you're on board, awesome. If you're not, get off the train. And the message was loud and clear here. Now, that is one aspect of this fallout, which is really interesting, but also looking at some of the news sources and how they're reporting it, and the fallout of that has been interesting. This from MSNBC.
And as for Secretary of Defense Hegseth, you know, the problem he has is that he is completely incompetent. The military and the men and women who were present in that auditorium, whether they were the senior enlisted advisors, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, we value competency. That's what we value. He has not earned his spurs.
Talk about those conversations that I've had with active duty members of the military, but the ones I've talked to are insulted by what happened today, especially the women that I've talked to, some of the women that I've spoken to. I know the men and women that were in that room. Many of them work for me. I haven't been retired that long. Some of those 3- and 4-star generals were colonels and lieutenant colonels with me in different units. So I know them, and I know the strength of their character, the worth of them as human beings and as leaders.
Now, that letter I showed you of that general that is retiring has been alluded or allegedly connected with this. It doesn't directly say that, but people are like, the same day. That's a little suspicious. But, you know, looking at it from that, I'm like, there's not a ton of admirals and generals just dropping pack and saying, I'm out of here. That's just not the case. If so, we'd see more than one single letter saying that. And you can see that this witch hunt is continuing on as people are like, let me figure out how many people can get out of the military and how can I spin it this way to just make it look like it's bad. That's because New York Times here has posted a thing looking for people to say, I'm getting out because of this speech. And they say, are you quitting the military? We want to hear from you. And then it says the New York Times is looking for generals and admirals who are quitting the military. The thing about it is it's social media. People are going to know if you're retiring. Admirals and generals make announcements if they're retiring. This is not just like an E3, E4 getting out of the military. They would probably let you know. But people are reading through that, and that's kind of basic because look at the source. New York Times. First comment here. The New York Times, you already know the angle, and it's the top voted comment. Now, with all this, on top of that, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has dropped so many different memorandums of what they're looking to do. And I don't think they're that spicy. I don't think they're that crazy, to be honest with you. To summarize this first one is memorandum for the Pentagon leadership. It says modern workforce management. To summarize it, all he's saying here is if you're a government employee, standards and being able to excel past your peers and be recognized for that is something that should be relevant. Not just people coming to work as a government worker and be like, I collect a paycheck. It doesn't matter how good or bad I do. We've known that system has been very bureaucratic and people complain about it because there's just not enough stringent measurement of like success or output or whatever to make it more efficient. And honestly, that would demotivate a lot of people to want to work somewhere where they're not getting appreciated no matter how hard they work. This next one is the requirement to formally present Purple Heart medals and Valor decorations. What he's saying here is like, you're going to get an official ceremony if you've gotten a Purple Heart. This next memorandum that talks about the whole beard thing, he's giving every single secretary of their department, whether it be Air Force, Navy, whatever, 60 days to implement some kind of plan. Rewinding the clock back to 2020 and before for shaving standards, and then for religious accommodations, he's just going back to what was in place during 2010 standards. So it's a little bit more military-like, and that is not a secret that we knew that's what it was going to be. This next memorandum is all about the administrative investigations that are going in. And I have to tell you that I appreciate this because there are a lot of careers that have been hindered. So I'm going to show this and I'm just going to summarize it. You have to have some kind of credibility within 7 days. If not, that's bad. You are going to still be able to move whatever and do your thing as long as this is not egregious and you are essentially not hurting anybody, kids, family, all the crazy stuff. But then also transparency and predictability. He is saying you have 14 days. Every 14 days after your case is open, we're going to let you know what's happening, where you're at. Because right now, it's just like, no idea what's going on with my case. We sit in limbo for months. And so this will put pressure on commanders to be like, we need to get these problems done, closed, out of, because if not, we're not going to do that. And we know, we've already seen this, where once you have a bad mark on your back as a service member, you are not going to be looked at favorably for schools, for promotions, for evaluations and stuff like that. So having stuff linger is not a good idea. And this next thing to go with that is they're looking at all the equal opportunity stuff where essentially people get clogged up with it. They would have these crazy timelines. And what they're saying is like, you got 15 days of receipt to respond about these. You've got 60 days to kind of coordinate all this. All these backlogs of equal opportunity complaints, they're going to centralize them, and they want to find a way on how to get over this administrative process and make these more efficient, which I'm like, please, thank you. I've seen some of these go on for months, and it's bad. Another big part of that is these military equal opportunity programs. He's been like, we're done with these kind of mudslinging type of situations where some random person could just be like, and then essentially send it off, get somebody in trouble, hold them up for legal hold for months, hold back schools, promotions, all that stuff. And he's like, no. You are going to have to kind of show your face. And that's because they're saying that in order to foster this resolution to make equal opportunity better, they're like, no. You are no longer going to get anonymous complaints, but you will get confidential complaints. And that means that you will essentially be able to still complain, but it's just your name will not be released per se. And this is a big one. The big one that a lot of people, I would say everybody in the military could agree on. The level of computer-based training. He's like, let's remove some of that. The frequency of it. Doing cybersecurity every single year. Is it making us any better? Is that the case? And then on top of that, they're saying removing some of these trainings entirely because they're not that great. And essentially allowing people to train more so on warfighting than just click, 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 doing a Quizlet, trying to get over it. And like he said on a speech with this memorandum, he's talking about the military education training. And what they're doing is they're like, let's go back to 1990 and then let's evaluate everything from then till now. What has changed and why we changed it? What was the purpose of that? And so, yeah, I'd say that's like actually doing an after action report, looking at OIF, OEF, looking at from a 91 Desert Storm, Desert Shield period, which that was Middle East. Then we include OIF, OEF. Then we're like able to look at the Houthis and all these other things that we've done at sea. And I'm like, yes, we should be looking from those historical contexts and be like, what has really worked and what hasn't, and why did we change certain things? And we're getting a more defined look at the fitness standards that he is wanting, and that includes this memo where essentially if you are not upholding the standards in your unit, you will be held accountable. You are going to be on a leveled basis or some kind of report number, objective data to say whether you're at a certain standard within fitness, not just pass or fail on advancements. And we've already been seeing some of that in different branches and how they do that. For example, the Marine Corps has, the different levels and scores that you get on your PFT and CFT. Now, he did talk about the combat field test a little bit, just briefed over it, but they're going to have 60 days to submit an execution plan for that. And essentially, he's provided this table to kind of outlay what he is looking for. So here you can see that there's a service fitness test, and he says sex neutral, age norm simplified, male standard must achieve 70% average across all elements, which is what he mentioned on stage. And then he says non-combat armed personnel, sex normed, age normed, and then combat field test is required service determined standards must be executable in any environment at any time with combat equipment, and non-combat not applicable. And lastly, combat readiness test not applicable, but it says for non-combat is required, but maybe substitute with service fitness test must be executable in any environment at any time with combat equipment as appropriate. So we're going to be seeing a lot of weird changes with this. I look at the Army and the Marine Corps, you're going to have people that are wearing flak Kevlar, doing fitness tests of some kind, training like they are for combat. Then on the other side of this, you're going to see the Navy, the Air Force, Space Force. I don't know what they're going to be wearing. I don't know if they're going to be wearing camelbacks or what to do some training, but they're not carrying spaceships, I'll tell you that much. And then this memo is about the adverse information policy, and he's mentioned it in his speech, but we have a more refined thing of this. Essentially, it's like, if you've messed up, we're not going to hold it against you forever. Now, they do have to have a revision of this in 45 days, and they're saying that anything outside of 10 years should not be held against you as a board of inquiry or whatever else as an officer. And essentially, you can have a hiccup in your career and it not be the end of everything. And lastly, to kind of top the cake, we're seeing some meltdown from some veterans that are out there about all of the policies, and I kind of want to show that.
So I am sick and tired of Pete Hegseth lying about women in the military and standards, okay? Our Secretary of War consistently insults every woman who has served and has met the combat standards that have always been equal. Most women in the military I know, women vets, could actually care less about what this insecure man has to say about us. But considering he has a platform and considering he continues to lie, I think it's really important to say the truth. So here's the truth. Since combat roles have been opened for qualified women, there have always been one standard for those jobs. Flying a fighter jet, for example. There was never a men's standard and a women's standard for flying. Never. There wasn't a men's standard or a woman's standard to be an artillery officer or an infantryman. There wasn't a men's standard or a woman's standard to be a tanker or to be on a submarine. There was always one standard. Always. It's a slap in the face and offensive to suggest otherwise. You are diminishing the service of thousands of women who have met the standard, the one standard, or exceeded them 100%. I think there's some confusion sometimes around administrative standards, okay? Administrative standards are things that test people when they come into the service, or maybe annual measures of health and fitness. And those are based on age. Some of them are based on height and weight, which are different for lots of different people. And yes, some are based on gender. Those are administrative standards. They are not the same as combat job standards. All combat job standards have always been the same from day one. Let me repeat. All combat job standards have always been the same from day one. So don't believe Pete Hegseth. The standards have never been lowered. Yeah, my dog doesn't believe him either. Okay, the standards have never been lowered. There's always been one standard.
And that's coming from this former Marine pilot, F-18 pilot to be specific, Amy McGrath, that's kind of gone on social media about this. However, there are people in contrarian to this, and they have to say this. This person says, when I was enlisted, women had lower standards to meet than men did. That's a fact. Jeff Goodwin says, so why have a male and female PT standard in the United States Air Force? So I understand her point. In an occupational side of things, whether you were in a F-18 and you're hurt and you have to do these maneuvers as a pilot, you still have to go do them whether you are male or female. But I think what's kind of hard about this, you're not talking about on the ground combat roles, which is kind of the main thing he's talking about. And that is something that as a winger, I'm not trying to be offensive when I say that, that is a very different understanding than somebody that is on the ground and the requirements of those skill sets. For example, Bryce Pretty here says, I weigh about 270 pounds in full kit. If I go down, most women alive will not be able to carry me to safety. So yeah, there's a lot of debate back and forth about all these very, very drastic changes that are going on as far as climate and culture that are happening. But looking at all the memorandums, I'm sitting here and I'm like, they're not too crazy. I think it's like, let's be more efficient. Let's get stronger. Let's get better. I just think a lot of people could agree with this. Maybe if we were coddly hands and like, we should just be real nice about it, you know, it might be better. But I think there is an aspect of like, people think of the military as being rough and tough, and that has not been the same for a lot of people. But let me know what you guys think about all these issues down in the comments below. As always, that's where the conversation continues.